it's Cece, and today I am here to talk about my least favorite books that I read in all of 2016. Last year, I went kind of tame, and I did only 5 books that were my least favorites of the year, but today, I am upping it. I am talking about my 10 least favorite books of 2016. We are going to start with 10 and work our way down to 1, like my most hated book that I read this year, so we're working our way down to the bottom, I guess. And let's just jump right in and talk about some of the books that I really didn't like reading this year. So the very first book on my top 10 least favorite books of the year, I guess bottom 10 least favorite books of the year. I don't really know how to phrase this, but whatever it is, the number 10 spot goes to Naomi and Eli's Nokiss List by Rachel Cohn and David Levithan, which is about 2 best friends, Naomi and Eli, and they have a no-kiss list of the boys. Neither of them are allowed to kiss. But that isn't really a problem because Naomi is in love with Eli despite the fact that Eli is gay. And then of course Eli is the one to break the no-kiss list when he is the one who kisses Naomi's boyfriend. I really didn't like this book for a lot of reasons. First of all, there were way too many perspectives. The book jumped around constantly to a lot of these characters who had no real bearing on the story. I also hated Naomi. She may have grown a little bit by the end of the book, but the primary part of her personality was that she was in love with her gay best friend, and he didn't love her back, and that is like a real struggling point for her, and I never felt for her at any point because he's gay. The only saving grace of this book was Bruce 2, that's Naomi's boyfriend / the person that Eli kisses. His journey was wonderful. I loved him as a character, and I would have much rather read about him than any of the other characters in this book because they were all pretty terrible people, honestly. So this was definitely not a book that I enjoyed. Number 9 on my list goes to The Other Typist by Suzanne Rindell. This is a book that takes place in 1920s New York. It is about a typist in a police precinct, and then a new typist moves into town, Odalie, and the two start to get involved in a lot of illegal business. Prohibition era, so they keep going to speakeasies and such, and it's drawing Rose, our main character, out of her shell as Odalie draws her into this world of things that she would never have normally done. Things that I didn't like about this book, first of all, is that it was promoted as a book that contained lesbians because it does not. Also, the author has said that the character she says is a lesbian doesn't have an identity other than a broken sexuality, and that's like outside of the book, but it's still really messed up. The twist ending of this book was so lackluster to me. I didn't get anything out of it. And a lot of people were confused by the ending, but I saw it coming the whole time, and I didn't really understand how we were not supposed to assume that's how it was going to end from the beginning. I kind of kept waiting for a second twist to actually make the story surprising. It was interesting and 1920s, and I liked the setting, but other than that, I really did not like this book. Coming in at number 8, we've got The Cuckoo's Calling by Robert Galbraith, aka J.K. Rowling. You probably haven't heard me talk about this book yet because I haven't done my monthly wrap-up yet, and I read this book for the first time in December. This is just a detective story. It's about a guy named Cormoran Strike. He gets this new secretary named Robin, and she ends up kind of tagging along with him Watson style because he's a private detective, and they get hired to solve the mystery of a model who looks like she killed herself, but her brother feels she did not. I did not care for Cormoran Strike in the least. At all. I really didn't like him, and what bothered me deeply about him is that he has the same thing that all of these male characters have, that no matter how mediocre they are as people, women will just fling themselves at them willy-nilly, losing all sense of knowledge or control of anything. And that's annoying enough, except for the fact that the women in the book followed that trope. They did just fling themselves at men who were remotely not mediocre. I don't think Robin was utilized in any way, and I didn't like Cormoran, and frankly, the end of the book was ridiculous. It was such a blow-off twist, it just wasn't worth all of the build-up. The mystery was interesting, but the payoff was definitely not. And I decided almost immediately upon starting the book that I was not going to be continuing with the series. Speaking of disappointing mysteries and thrillers, the next book I have on here is You Will Know Me by Megan Abbott. I was incredibly excited about this book. This is a mystery about professional gymnastics. I was a gymnast for a majority of my life, at least growing up. It was a huge, huge part of my childhood, and so I was so excited to read a thriller about gymnastics. Unfortunately, like a lot of other thrillers I've read this year, the ending was such just nothingness. From the beginning of the book, it makes it pretty clear what the end is going to be, and yet somehow it's still sort of written like it's supposed to be a twist. And the only way that twist works is if you are as dumb as the main character, who spends the entire book just constantly in every conversation going, "What? What's going on? I don't understand." She was the mother of this girl who was supposed to be an Olympic gymnast, and she spent the entire book just doing absolutely nothing. She just went from place to place and was confused, and by the time I got to the end, I was really worried about her, that she kind of hadn't put the pieces together yet, because they were all very clearly there. So this book was in general just a huge letdown, once again, because I hated the main character, and the plot twist did nothing for me. Okay, coming in at number 6, we've got Why We Broke Up by Daniel Handler with art by Maira Kalman. I love A Series of Unfortunate Events. You can see, I have all the books behind me, and so I wanted to read some of Daniel Handler's other work. Unfortunately, this was the first thing that I've picked up by him that wasn't A Series of Unfortunate Events. This book is told in a series of vignettes. It's about this girl writing a long letter to an ex, and she is putting all of the things that remind her of him in a box. And so at the beginning of each vignette, we get a picture of whatever's going in the box and then a story about why that item is in there. The main character of this book was my biggest problem, the one writing the letter. She felt incredibly pretentious to me, and she was one of those girls that her only appeal was that everyone just kept telling her how different she was. I actually did a whole video this year about girl hate in books and why "you're not like other girls" is a really damaging trope, and I will leave that link on the screen if you want to go watch it. But that means at that point in time, I was really sensitive about that trope, and this book was chock full of it. Plus, I read this entire book. It's like a reasonably thick book, and I cannot tell you why these two people got together in the first place, or why a relationship of the length that they had deserved this long a breakup note. No. Coming in at number 5 on this list is 3 Truths and a Lie by Brent Hartinger. I requested this book. You know, this is an arc, so clearly I was excited to read it, and unfortunately it did not work. It actually intersects the two main types of books that are on this list because it is both queer and it is a thriller. And the reason that is because I'm constantly seeking out new queer books and new thrillers, and so I'm bound to be disappointed by a few of them, and this unfortunately was where those two things collided. This book is about 4 friends who go up to a cabin and then things start going terribly wrong. They're playing a game called 3 Truths and a Lie, and it seems like the lies and the truths are getting mixed up and are getting scarier, and it seems like maybe someone is after them. Basically, every character in this book changed personalities multiple times throughout in order to fit whatever the current storyline had to be at that moment. It was clearly going for a scary cabin in the woods type vibe with a bunch of teenagers and what's going on, but I'm, as usual, baffled as to where the parents were and why they allowed this situation to happen in the first place. The writing wasn't very good, I didn't like the main character, and the twist was utterly unbelievable and so overused. So this was a definite no for me. The next book I'm going to mention has sort of a similar issue, and that book is Black Iris by Elliot Wake, writing formerly as Leah Raeder. This is yet another thriller with queer main characters that did not work for me. It's very, very difficult to explain the plot of this book. It's sort of a revenge story. It's kind of a long con story. There is supremely disjointed storytelling, and that I think is one of its biggest weaknesses. It jumps around so much, not between 2 times, but between so many different times that by the time I got halfway through, I had no idea where we were, and every time I had to read a new chapter, I'd have to refer to a chart to figure out what on earth was going on. Also, Elliot Wake's writing just does not work for me. It is so flowery that I have to read a sentence 3 times to even understand what it's trying to say. By the time I got to the end, I was so frustrated by how difficult it was to work through the overly wordy writing and the characters that I don't think were written particularly well, especially the main character, who was one of those main characters who has to tell me on every page how messed up she is, which just makes me not believe her, that I didn't care about any of it, and it just did not work. At number 3, we've got Me Before You by Jojo Moyes. Ah, the ableism. So this book is about a girl named Louisa, and she becomes the caretaker for a quadriplegic man, and all the ableism follows. So this book is written about a romance between an able-bodied woman and a quadriplegic man, but it is written from an incredibly able-bodied lens. Everything in this man's life is about making everyone else's life better. His disability serves to make other people learn about how lucky they are. Not to mention the fact that rape is used to motivate the story along, and it's just in there for really unnecessary reasons. It's not romantic at all. Plus, it's pretty emotionally manipulative in a lot of ways, from my point of view as well. So overall, reading this book was a fairly negative experience, thus why it is taking my number 3 spot. Okay, top 2. Coming in at number 2, we've got You by Caroline Kepnes. This is a book. It is written sort of in second person, sort of in first person, about a guy named Joe, and he is a serial killer, but a lot of the book is written as, you do this, so it feels like he is the one stalking you, the reader, and then he meets this girl back in his bookstore and he starts stalking her. Let me just say straight off, because I did not hear this in any reviews before I read this book and I neglected to put it in my original review. If you're not a fan of the bury your gaze trope, or if you are a queer person in general, you are not going to be pleased with one of the particular storylines that happens in this book. In fact, I was deeply infuriated by it. Joe is supposed to be an unlikable main character, and I completely understand that. Obviously, I'm not supposed to be on his side. He kills people, but he was also really pretentious, and you know what? That just puts up a roadblock for me, and so was everyone else in the book. I don't know if I was supposed to root for Beck, but I kind of wanted to hit her over the head with a brick myself. I kept waiting for some big twist at the end to make me invested in anything that was happening, and it never came at all. In fact, I just gradually grew to care less and less about every individual character, so that by the end I was like, can't they just all die so I never have to think about any of this again? I also think, by the way, that the second person thing was a gimmick that was not used to its full potential. It just came across as gimmicky and I really didn't care for it. And the final book on my list, my least favorite thing that I read in all of 2016, is actually a play. Yeah? You getting there on your own? I thought you might. It is Harry Potter and the Cursed Child by Jack Thorne. I have like an 18-minute spoilery rant video discussion if you want to go watch that. I hated pretty much everything about this, which you will see if you go and watch my discussion video. I didn't think any of the original characters were in character, and I know a lot of people's defense is, hey, times have changed, it's been 19 years, but a lot of it was, I don't see a world in which the characters could develop and become these characters. There was rampant queer-baiting, abuse, apologism, female characters were pushed to the side once again, and to be honest, for the middle 2 acts of this play, I thought I was reading My Immortal. It was just bad fan fiction. It was really bad fan fiction, and also, speaking of characters I want to hit upside the head with a brick, whew, we just had to bring him back, didn't we? So overall, despite the fact that I went into this book cautious but cautiously optimistic, it did not turn out well for me, and so it is definitely my least favorite thing that I read this entire year. Before we wrap this up, I just want to say one thing. I am currently reading a book called Blink by Ted Dekker, and because I am filming this before I read this book, like in its entirety, this is not on there, but having read 140 pages of this book, it deserves a place for so many reasons. Islamophobia, misrepresentation of Muslim women, misogyny, fat phobia, and many more. In general, it's just really bad, and so if I had waited a little bit longer, and if I had been able to film this a little later, just letting you know, this would have had a spot. Okay guys, there you go. Those are all my least favorite things that I read in 2016. That was fun. It was fun to get out my anger at some of those books. In the comments below, please let me know what some of your least favorite reads from 2016 were. I know that there are other people out there like me who love a good rant about books they didn't like. Thank you so much for watching, and look for my favorite books of 2016 video. It should be coming around tomorrow sometime. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!